This is the Weigh In Podcast by Ben Watt Chestnut and normally Sash Romero, but he will return at some point. So on this week's Weigh In, we're gonna go over first of all the UFC disaster for this weekend's fight. Opponent backing out last minute for that Blanche fight night. And then we're gonna talk about Caleb Plant's fight, how I kind of felt, what Caleb we should have got, and the rest is probably going to come as we go. So, first off, in that backing out UFC fight, with all that Blanche card, um, all things said, I got it, let me pull it up here from my phone because I got it down. I wrote some strong words to what happened because I kind of feel like there was I had it strong words that I just kind of felt about the whole thing because it just ain't right. What went on was just absolutely like, come on. Like I say, I get injuries happen, but not like that. So let me to Barber to come out and say, hey, um, you know, let me because what I didn't do was put actually what happened. So let's go ahead and let me put that. Let me go ahead and figure out what actually happened. The true, you know, happenings. Here we go. Macy Barber said it was a bad hand. Do do I believe that? No. I think Macy Barber knew she was not going to win that fight already as it is. She knew it was going to be a hard fight. Then came in and says, hey, I have a bad hand. I'm pretty sure there are tons of UFC fighters, men and women, boxers, men and women, that have gone into fights with bad hands and have still come out on top. So to say you have a bad hand in the sport of MMA, when you do it in boxing you can't kick, you can't wrestle. So when you're doing it in boxing, there's a true disadvantage. But say you have a bad hand and say, okay, well, now I can't compete because of that. You're withdrawing from the fight from a bad hand. Macy Barber knew she was going to lose that fight, and that's just plain and simple. She knew she wasn't going to win, and she knew that. And then you come in and say your hand's bad. Spiss bear. I don't think so. I don't think so. But there's a lot of reports going out. So even that to say, hey, to not fight from a bad hand, as I look at some of this, as I take a look at this, you know, and that's just the way I look at it. If you're gonna say it's a bad hand, and I think Macy Barber was gonna win the fight. Now, in regards to what is jumped around, I know as looking here, They're saying what might have caused that no fight last minute was a seizure. You know, and that's fine. You know, and in terms of that, you can't when it comes medically like that. There's nothing you can do. In terms of those. But in regards to the half pound and saying things about the hand, I was just like, nah, 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 nah. Ain't no bad hand on that. There ain't no bad hand on that. And the only reason why I say most of that is because, there are tons of people who get in there who can get in the ring or the octagon with a bad hand. So, I mean, in terms of finally getting down to what actually happened is a seizure, possibly. That's a little different, but it's still like, okay, you gotta I know that's out of somebody's control. But when you're coming and wanting to see a main event where you think it's gonna do it, you want to. Even then, I still think Barber wasn't gonna win the fight. That's that's just that's just pure honesty right now talking. Barber was not going to win that fight. And I'm telling you this because I don't think she was going to win the fight at all. Like I had no no frontal faith that she was going to win that fight. I just didn't think she was going to win. I've seen enough UFC at this point, enough of that stuff that I know. I'm not saying I'm Dana White. I don't know talent when I see it, right away. But I'm telling you, I know Barber was not going to win that fight. Nah, that's what I'm saying. And even if they do still schedule that and a, 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 a round two at it, or really round one, you never really had round one or whatever the case may be, I still have Blanche. I don't think Barber's going to win the fight, even if they do try again. I don't think so. You know, I don't think so. I don't really think so. But amidst that, that's just how I felt, and us getting down to the news of it all together. So with that being said, we got down to that, to be able to chalk that up. So, you know, we were able to get to that. Now, for Caleb Plant and that Jamel Charlo fight, many of you want to know, would probably want to know who was I going for in that Jamel Charlo fight. I was going for Thomas Cornflake. I was going for Thomas. You know, I was going for Thomas. But in other words, Caleb Plant's loss, that one got me. Plant's been trying to get it and do him, and that's been a great thing. But I definitely think that him versus Charlo is going to definitely be it's going to definitely be what's the word I'm looking for? It's definitely not going to happen right away. The plans have definitely been put on I would say a hold. Caleb got beat in a split decision. There's just no other way that could go. It happens. It happens. You have to understand that's what we've been talking about all these months. That best self, and you say Caleb Plant did not come in his best self, and that's something we kind of talk about more than times enough. That you got to It doesn't matter who's across the ring. You got to treat it like it's almost like they have the power, they have the knowledge to stop you. And I kind of felt like, Plant gets in there, he got beat. I understand sometimes in boxing, you know, you can't always account for how the judges may score and see the fight, but you know, very well so if you go in there and you prove yourself, you clearly prove yourself, then you won't have that problem of whether did judging did judging get it right. And you a lot of times they used to tell us when we was wrestling, you want to keep the referee out of it. You don't want to put it in the hands of the official. So I would say the same thing for boxing. You don't want to put it in the hands of the official. So, you don't want the ref looking and saying, okay, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? That's something I say you don't want to put it in the hands of the official for many of reasons. You put it in the hands of the judges, the official, the referee, whatever your sport may call them, you run the risk of being beat. You run the risk of being beat. The ref may not always see it the same way you see it. You have to understand our points of view are not the same points of view from an angle or from a side view or from any perspective. Nobody's going to not see it the way you do in the moment. So, Plant was supposed to be Caleb Plant to win, Charlo to win, then Plant Charlo. I think we're a little ways off of that Plant Charlo because right now, by the way the things went, as much as I was not rooting for Charlo to win, I think Charlo, if he was to box Plant right now, would probably stop him. He would probably win that fight. And I'm gonna tell you why, because right now, Charlo's looking good. Charlo looking real good. You come off of beating a guy, really getting that knockout stoppage. But do I think my man Caleb Plant do I think Caleb Plant is ready to? I don't think so. There are many ways where I side with different sides and on different things, and I'm all for Caleb Plant, Charlo. I'll always take Caleb Plant over that. But do I think that Caleb Plant's ready right now? No, I don't. I really don't think he's. I don't. I really don't. And I would say now is not a time for Caleb Plant to embark in that because you got to get you. And I understand every fight's different, but you got to get yourself. You got to get yourself right first, and I think that's more or less the situation for Caleb Plant. You got to get yourself right first. And even then, when you have yourself right, you got to make sure you're perfect before doing so. You don't want to embark in something and then be like, oh, well, you get beat. You want to be ready for it. That's why I kind of say, now's not the time for Plant, but I can always be wrong. And that's the thing I will always say is if I'm wrong, I'll always notice when I'm wrong. I'll always, own up to it. But right now, I don't think Plant's ready. I don't think Caleb ready for all that. I don't think he's ready to be getting in the ring with Charlo. Not right now, you know. And I understand, sometimes you could still put up a good fight and lose. It's possible. It's possible, you know. But here on the weigh-in, we react to the decisions, the verdict, and that's just that simple. That's just the way we do it. We react to the verdict and stuff like that. That's the way we react. And I kind of feel, you know, You got to get in there. You got to get the job done. You know, they give you a fight. They were supposed to. This is like, what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the Ryan Garcia Devin Haney, because Ryan Garcia Devin Haney scheduled fights. Plan is to fight again. Ryan Garcia got beat. Why is it always the main attraction? Right? Like the main event was Plant. Plant got beat. That night in May, Ryan Garcia was the main event, the attraction. Ryan got beat. So, are we starting to see a trend here? Possibly. It's possible that we're starting to see a trend here. It's possible that we're seeing a trend or something like that. But whether we are or aren't, that's kind of going to be up to us, almost in a sense, to whether we are or aren't, because that's something that we would have to say, are we? And I don't think we have enough fights yet. We don't have that happening enough times to say whether we are or not. And I think it's starting to. I think we have a big start of a trend here. That the main attraction gets beat. But there is a start. There is a very well thought out start here that's happening, and I feel like it's going to get interesting, because this is, the whole point was and you know what, this is what goes. I think we talked about this on our wrestling episodes before. You got to focus on what's in front of you, not what's ahead. Many of you, I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to break it down for you, for many reasons. When you focus about what's ahead and not what's in front of you, the exact opposite, you're so worried about, when I get Charlo likes to punch like this, Charlo likes to, but you're not focused and worried about the guy in front of you, and that guy beats you because you're so worried about what you're gonna face instead of what you are facing. And that's just one of the things that I kind of have embarked across, because you can't turn around and say, hey, I'm gonna face this. Well, you haven't done it yet. You haven't. You haven't, and I kind of feel like that's one thing that, if you haven't done it, don't sit there and say, oh yeah, this is the way it is. And I kind of feel that way, because you could tell when you get beat because you didn't focus on what's in front of you. And that's one of the biggest things surrounding any event, any sport, is just you have to focus on what's in front of you, not what's ahead. When you talk about what you may face, what you're gonna face, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. You didn't face that yet. So don't get going about, hey, this is something I may have, because you don't. You don't have it. You're not there yet. And if you're not there yet, then you haven't faced it. And moving forward and saying, no, I got this. I'm gonna beat this. You just don't do things like that, because you make mistakes. You make mistakes in those times, and that's one of the things that I say all the time is, if you're focused on what's ahead and not what's in front of you, you're gonna make mistakes. It's not guaranteed, but it's almost possible that a mistake can be and might be made. And that's just the way I've always looked at it. If you're gonna do something along the lines to get yourself ready for a big fight, you've got to make sure how you prepare yourself for that is in ways that you don't think about what's ahead. You don't think about, hey, I got this. And that's just one way I like to look at it. You cannot look like, hey, I got through this already. I'm good. I don't have to worry about this, because what happens is then when you get to the things you're supposed to do, the events you're supposed to have lined up, the stuff you need to have done, you fail. But you don't fail for reasons that you think are of are unknown. You fail for reasons because you've now not done things the right way. And I say that because the way you go about an event. So if I'm going to face a guy, I get ready for that guy. And I say, well, wait a minute. If I beat this guy, I got another guy coming. So, that guy, I faced him. I faced this guy before. That guy, he's gonna punch like this, he's gonna box like this, or he shoots 2 takedowns and he likes to go for an arm bar, whatever the case may be. I can't worry about the guy I will get, because I won't get it if I don't get through what's in front of me. If I will face, I say, okay, I'm in a title eliminator fight. Title eliminator fights are fights where you say, okay, you have a 1 and 2, and you say who's going to get the title shot. So if I'm like, oh, when I fight the champ, I got to worry about he's a southpaw. No, I don't. I have to worry about what's in front of me first, because then if I don't beat that, I don't get no champ. So it's stuff like that where I say, when they're talking about coming back and beefing, and then you schedule somebody else, you're not focused on that somebody else. And that's how I kind of feel the main attractions get beat. That's how I feel, Garcia got beat. I feel like he was like, oh, I'm getting Devin Haney. Rolly, I'm going to get through Rolly. Rolly, I'm going to get through him. But he didn't. And you put yourself in that situation where if you don't get through what's in front of you, now you won't. And I kind of feel like, when you don't get through what's in front of you, stuff happens. Stuff happens, Stuff happens in ways that many may not be able to understand, that when you don't do the stuff that's in front of you like you're supposed to, stuff kind of happens. And I think it's a lucrative because the way the stuff happens is fairly interesting, because stuff doesn't get done. That is just my little ramble about, not focusing about what's in front of you. In terms of Caleb Plant, will he bounce back? Yes, Caleb Plant will bounce back. I think he will. We're talking about a guy that has had world titles before, that has fought Canelo, but you just have to stay sharp. You have to stay sharp. Don't worry so much about Charlo, and instead, because you could tell, and Charlo wasn't worried about Plant. Charlo was worried about blocking out all the noise and getting his stuff done. When they were talking about last year's Super Bowl, they talked about, well, okay, the Eagles have to block out all the noise, the storyline, everything then, and then they'll be able to do what is a good thing. And, I agree. They got to block out all that noise. I agreed with that statement. So, in terms of that, I will use it in terms of boxing, UFC. They got to block out all the noise. And, you know, you know, even, like we say, amidst what happened with Blanche, that fight, regardless of, the medical scare, glad everything's all good kind of thing. But even then, we still talk about, okay, what's the denomination here? And, and I say that because yeah, you missed a fight, you're upset, wherever, this and that, and amidst all the reports, and you were able to get in the ring still. My question now is, okay, line it up again. We're going to get 2. Give us 2. Give us a 2 for that. It's the same thing. Like Caleb Plant, I don't think we need a 2 for that. If you think you're ready for Charlo, go ahead. But I kind of think not so much. That's the way I feel about it. I feel not so much. You know, I feel like not so much. I don't think Plant's ready, but if Plant decides he wants to schedule the fight and he thinks he's ready, whatever, the case may be, we'll break it down for y'all. We'll get there. But nonetheless, an exciting weekend of boxing. So I do think, there was some good stuff. If we look at the boxing schedule, we're making I'm waiting on that Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor, and you know, Jake Paul's next fight. So, and there's some exciting stuff in that Canelo Crawford. So there's some exciting boxing stuff. Even UFC's got some stuff coming. Um, you know, this week we've got the Dashville O'Malley 2, which should be really good. So we got O'Malley coming up this weekend. We got Topora Oliveira on June 28th. Like, I think this is another well-scheduled month for Dana White in the UFC, and I give credit where it's due, and I'm going to give Dana his credit. It's a well-scheduled month of UFC. We've got Oliveira coming in, getting it in Topora. Nice. We've got O'Malley fighting this month. I'm going to give it to him. I like it. And then we got Usman. Usman on a card on June 14th. That's the stuff I'm talking about. That's the stuff I'm talking about. I think there's some good stuff going on here, happening. Some really good stuff. So we know boxing, the fights we're waiting on. I think Dana has been doing some good scheduling. We've been seeing a lot of good UFC right now, where you're not just like, okay, that guy's getting we're getting a lot of like good challenges, where we're seeing a lot of champions drop in some cases. So I kind of feel like we're getting good stuff from the UFC, which is really good, and we know we getting our boxing. You know, Excited to see some stuff, but we're definitely getting our boxing. So I kind of think we are getting a little bit of stuff in the ways we want to see it. That Canelo Crawford. If you're asking, I know nobody's asking right now, but if you're asking, I have Crawford. I have Crawford. I have Crawford that fight. Because if Crawford comes in there the same way he did Spence, I have Crawford. But I'll always think the ways with Crawford, because I saw him. I wasn't there, but I saw the fight where he tore up Earl Spence Jr. And that's when I'm like, You know what I want to see? A lot of people might not agree with me. I want to see Earl Spence Jr. and Ryan Garcia. Let's see if we can make that happen. Earl Spence Jr. and Ryan Garcia. Like, let's see if they could get together, because I know that was they were beefing at one point. Like, that's something I guess a lot of us have forgot about. Earl Spence Jr. and Ryan Garcia were beefing for a little bit. You know? So my question is, if they squash that beef, but considering after Ryan Garcia's last fight, I don't know. People might not agree with me, but I'd have Earl Spence Jr. in that fight. I'd have Earl Spence Jr. Taking that fight. But even then, amidst everything, we draw to an end. It's just a little epi. I know it's not as I would consider, one of our strong epis, where we're strong hearted. We had a little bit of event, little stuff surrounding boxing. You know, I will always try to get to the bottom of everything, so that by the time these episodes are off, I can always give you the truthful and the true stuff. But nonetheless, this is the way in. Like, comment, subscribe. You know, we're in our yearly uh record streak where we are recording um the rest of the year. You know, we've gotten this far. We're in June and we're still posting, and you know, I think in terms of, you know, does most New Year's resolutions last this long? No, but ours did. So like, comment, subscribe, share. You know, if you're new here, this is the way in. There's normally a partner, but you know, there, you know, in terms of explaining that I don't really ever address those. That just comes from him whenever he comes back, or you know, whenever he pops in, you know, when he can. Um, but nonetheless, this is the way in by Ben Chestnut and Sebastian Romero. And this is the way in by Ben Chestnut and normally Sebastian Romero. And we will return to our regularly scheduled program at some point. Weigh in out. The way in where stories ignite.